Did you know something new is invented every 10 minutes? Join us as we speak to the innovators reinventing our world here on planet Earth and far, far beyond. Welcome to GTWN Now, a podcast brought to you by the Global Telecom Women's Network and sponsored by CMS Global. GTWN Now introduces the movers and the makers at the cutting edge of technology who are committed to keeping us all connected. In each episode, we invite a leading expert to share her experience building life-changing inventions in places and spaces that don't yet exist, and the inspiration they must muster to tackle the impossible. We also ask our guests to share tips, tools, and strategies to reach your own moonshot. I'm your host, Rosali Gitau, founder of Bixi FinTech for Women and Global Telecom Women's Network International Board member. Welcome to GTWN Now. Today's episode will be hosted by GTWN board member Carla Chico. Carla is a vastly experienced businesswoman who has worked in a number of highly responsible positions for internationally renowned firms throughout her illustrious career. She has been a pioneer in both digital and ESG implementation. Carla has held the position of CEO of Brazil Telecom, one of the largest telecom operator companies in Brazil, with a place on the New York Stock Exchange. She was the first woman in South America to hold such a position. Carla is also a speaker at internationally recognized summits focusing on telecommunications, management, strategy, digital transformation, and developing countries. Enjoy the show.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And thank you very much for joining us today at the podcast of the series of Digital Humanism, edited and proposed by GTWN, Global Telecommunication Women Network. My name is Carla Chico, and in my capacity as the board member of our networking, I will moderate today's episode on Sharing is Caring, on transfer and use of data. Today, our expert is Dora Petranyi, that I'm happy to introduce to you. Dora is partner of and CE Managing Director at CMS, and she's also Global Co-Head of Technology, Media and Communication Group. She also had the TMC Data Protection and Intellectual Property IP practice. In addition to be expert in TMC, she also is an expert in AI, infrastructure, cybersecurity, data protection, GDPR, competition law, as well as general contract, corporate and Russian MA. So and she's also co-chairman of the Regulatory and Ethics Committee of the Hungarian AI Coalition. I think that with this background, she's the right person to introduce to us to this very important subject, meaning sharing in caring, and I suppose that we will talk about data sovereignty. So, Dora, the floor is to you. Thank you very much to be with us today.
Well, thank you, Carla, and thank you for the very, very thorough, very nice introduction. I think the topic is extremely interesting as well as very topical nowadays, because sharing really is caring. We have seen a couple of very good examples from the past couple of years when sharing of data became extremely critical. Let's just say in the pandemic years, and also it became part of the very important political questions of fighting wars because of the increased importance of a warfare which is not fought with weapons, but rather with data and access to data and cyber. So very naturally, there are lots and lots of regulations in place where countries impose restrictions on what to share and how to share data, how they, for example, use cloud, which is a technology which would actually enhance shareability of data. But at the same time, they need to make sure that their national interests remain intact. So all these questions have two main angles. One is privacy and what I can share as an individual, so digital humanism, what I do as an individual, and on the other hand, what does my country allow me to do, and what is my country's preferred interest there. And all these questions are surrounded by one phenomenon, which is called data sovereignty. So I want to introduce, or maybe start with the concept of data sovereignty.
Okay. Please go ahead, because please go ahead, because what you are saying is not only very important at the level as a private individual talking about the digital humanism, but also it will be important and is very important from a business point of view. So please introduce to our data sovereignty, and then we can discuss more the implication for private citizen as well for business owner and government.
Yeah, and you are very right that all three layers will be very important to discuss. Data sovereignty is basically a concept that the data is subject to the laws and governance structures of the nation where it is collected. This means that a country has or want to have control over the data generated within its borders. Historically, the concept was gained some prominence following the Snowden revelations, which exposed the extent of data collection by the US National Security Agency. This led to a global discussion on the importance of controlling and protecting national data. Over the years, many countries have enacted laws to ensure data sovereignty. Just one of the examples is GDPR, but also there are lots and lots of laws within the EU and overall in the world where access to cloud by private sector is limited. So you have a privacy-related data sovereignty angle, and then you also have a country security-related sovereignty angle. I have three questions to the audience as well to think about, and this is what I think we could be exploring further. Is it a competitive advantage or disadvantage to have these laws in place? What does it mean for the three layers that you mentioned, Carla, for the individual, for the businesses, for the states? Is it a must-have or a nice-to-have from a state security point of view? So really, why is sharing caring? Or why is sharing caring, in my view? I want to make a case that sharing is still caring.
Yeah, okay. So just to do the evil advocate, okay, we have the fact that I think that today we have almost 100 nations who has already established their sovereignty data law. My question to you is that not all the law are the same. So there are some, it could be that we can find some conflict and by the different law. So how can we overcome this? Because I agree with you that sharing is caring, but then we need to think about each country wants to have their own law, and because they have different value, for example, than there are different value, and they want to protect their own nation. On the other hand, if we are in business, and sorry that I always go back to business, but maybe in my background, is that if I am a multinational, for example, how can I navigate through this law jungle? Thank you very much.
It's a very good question. And actually, navigating the jungle is not easy. And part of the reason why it's not easy, as the title of this podcast series is Digital Humanism. I think it's fair to say that it's not only digital humanism. We are very much approaching an era of global humanism. Every question that we are discussing, what is actually relating to the digital being, is a very global question, given the information sharing opportunities, given how data travels across continents, how solutions travel across continents. And just one very recent example is, what's happening, for example, with TikTok. All over the world, that shows the global nature of and the impact on individuals of these questions. So how to navigate? It's not easy to navigate it. You should always start with your residence. So what is the law of your residence? If you're within the EU, it's even more complex because you have the national level and then the EU level regulations, but thankfully both on privacy as well as on non-private data, we have EU-wide regulations in place. So that's slightly less complex. Then the big question is what happens in the US and what happens with China, what's happening in India, what's happening in Latin America, or I will also have an example with Australia. Some of these territories are more protectionist. They want to control where the data of the individuals is traveling and how it is traveling, whether it is safe to travel that way. We are hoping that some of the solutions that are evolving, as the technology evolves, also the solutions are evolving, actually will find very similar answers. But my advice always is to start where you are residing, and that will help you guide to the labyrinth of other regulations as well. If you are truly operating as a business, a global enterprise, though, in addition to your residence, it's very important to have a good understanding on what are the key blockers or the key barriers of entry with respect to some of the countries, because not only the European Union, but also other laws might have some extraterritorial impact and might have some impact on your operations.
Well, I think that the arrival, of the cloud computing somehow should have make this sovereignty data more complicated, because before, when you have physical data center, you knew that the data were stored in that specific data center located, in Paris, Milan, Budapest, New York, or Beijing. Now with the cloud computing, where is the cloud computing? Where is the cloud where my computing is connected and where my data are stored? So how this is going to be faced by the regulator? And again, what is going to be the effect on private citizen and on business?
Indeed, the evolution of cloud computing has, again, served as a disruptor to useful ways of operation for businesses and also both private and public sector. Because the first reaction of the public sector and of many of the countries was a full ban. Please, if you're a public entity, you just don't use cloud because that's too dangerous. We don't know where our data lands. But actually, one of the wars, the example of the warfare in Ukraine showed how helpful it can be if your data is not stored in physical locations within your own country. Because I am told that during one of the first days or first weeks of the Russian invasion, actually they were targeting infrastructure. And part of the reason why the countries access to very critical information to citizens, to their court system, to their administration remained relatively intact was that a lot a majority of that data was actually in the cloud. So it was safer to be in the cloud than being on the ground in a physical data center location. Mm-hmm. And I think that example shows why it is important to find a solution for cloud computing. There are three types of clouds, and I don't want to be too specific and too technical about it, but there is such a thing. And hyperscalers are very, very adaptive in their solutions that they're offering. There is a sovereign cloud. You can do a private cloud, and then you can do a public cloud. You can also have an agreement where you say that, well, my data must remain within a certain geographic area, or you want to control where your data lands. The other example is banks and financial institutions, where there was a lot of hesitance at the early days on where and how to use cloud in relation to financial services. That is now one of the most advanced sectors, funny enough, because they see the benefits of using cloud rather than the cons using the cloud. And again, Europe is somewhat leading the way by introducing Dora, which I'm very sorry to say is not named after me, but for me it's very interesting to be able to talk about Dora all the time nowadays. That's the Digital Operations Resilience Act. So that introduced a new set of regulations and imposed also obligations on financial institutions how to use information technology services in a very safe and secure way, and what is it that they should request from their suppliers in this respect.
That's good, but I think that is also we have also to speak about the good things in having a data flow, because only to speak, because now we have spoken just of what are the rules, how to manage that. But can you share with us your point of view about cross-border data flow, and also the positive impact or negative impact that can have on individual and on business?
Yeah, so on the positive impacts, you can highlight a couple of things. First is you can only solve global issues if you really allow sharing of data. The pandemic response very early. It was clear that all the data in relation to research, to find the vaccine, to find the cure, needs to be a global effort. But it was not possible due to many local regulations to do that. So there were lots of laws enacting exceptions to be able to use when that pandemic was fought. And part of the solutions now becomes the standard, as for example, in European data spaces, which is one of a new example, healthcare will be the first where actually actors are encouraged to share their data going forward for research purposes. They are encouraged to share their clinical trial outcomes. There is a big difference between encouraged to share and mandating to share, because that is when you mandate something to share that can cause competitive disadvantage. But if you're encouraging sharing, that can be actually a competitive advantage. So that is one of the benefits. The other benefit is an economic benefit. And Carla, for you, it's probably very self-explanatory that if you use more if you allow a free flow of data, then you can reduce cost and time associated with such transfers. And this can, of course, enhance global trade and economic growth by making it easier for businesses to operate internationally, isn't it? And then the third is innovation. So the more clever people cooperate, the faster you can have innovation actually resulting in new breakthroughs, whether it is healthcare, whether it is a new technology, or whether it is in AI. So I can tell you a lot of examples on the good. Can I be a little bit also telling something about technological sovereignty? Because
absolutely, yes. Because this is a very important aspect, yes.
Because I think that's also quite important. So, and then you can cite a lot of articles nowadays on fight over semiconductors, on 5G networks, on synthetic biology, on blockchain, and the importance of this technical sovereignty. And some of the countries say that, hey, I want to govern my country independently. I don't want to be part of this international global scheme. It's scary. I lose control and I want to be independent. The other part of the world doesn't have the luxury to be able to do that because they would not have the resources to do the deployments on their own. So there are also some forced associations or forced alliances that will actually impact, I believe, the future of not only digital but global humanism. And that is where some of the countries choose a certain technology for their 5G networks, because simply they cannot afford any other technology. So this to me is also a question which was way beyond law and way beyond actually data transfers, but it's all about the sharing of the knowledge, the information that we have, and using it wisely.
Yeah. I fully agree with you because I think that especially nowadays in technology, I always say that it's better to follow and to use what has been already developed and then maybe to develop it better than to start from scratch, because otherwise you are going to use a lot of financing for something that is already there.
Absolutely.
What is really is, I have read that there are some criticism about data sovereignty because, and the criticism are more on the fact that government and regulatory body, that we have also to keep distinction. Regulatory body are something, and the government another one, even if they are part of the same system. They are trying, to bring the power all in the hand of the government on the public side versus the private citizen or private business. So we are talking about the digital humanism. What do you think that is really happening, and do you share this criticism or not?
As always, excessive measures are dangerous and can lead to unwanted consequences. So I do think that's probably the middle ground is the right way, because of course you need to be somewhat cognizant of the threats that some of the sharing or some of the opening of a full infrastructure can mean. But that is why, for example, the EU AI Act has a very, very large exception to it's applicable to otherwise a very wide scope of application, and that is in the name of national defense and strategic defense. So it's very well recognized that everything which is about to sharing cannot actually result in endangering the safety of the citizens of that country. However, if you abuse that, and if you close too much, then you can there is a danger that you can cut yourself out of what I would call the very global nature of the current technological innovation. And this is why I think you need to find the right middle ground when you do share, but you share wisely and you share safely.
With your background, the legal background and the lawyer specialized in all these issues, how do you see the fit of, because now we have another element. So artificial intelligence, how do this fit in all of this? That is already a complicated picture.
It does complicate the picture because AI is not only a very global phenomenon, but it is hungry for data and access to data, or at least currently we see that a lot of the AI capabilities are dependent on their access to data. And what that means, and I really would like to start right at the beginning, the infrastructure needs, the energy needs are as critical as actually the access to data. So this is why it's a very humanistic question when we talk about AI, because it does influence the future of humanism already due to the infrastructure, the energy needs, even before we start talking about the access to data. I believe currently we have 3 responses. In this respect, the US response is a very business-focused response. But the US has always been having the approach that laissez-faire, let the businesses thrive, and when it becomes too big, then we can step in. But let's first see what the opportunities are in a new technology. Then you have the Chinese response, which I think, and I'm fascinated by DeepSeek and the evolution of DeepSeek, because to me, DeepSeek is an example that, they just simply don't even put a price tag probably on what is the value of the access to the data. And this is how, so I regard the figure a little bit with a skepticism on that, but it already had an impact on, for example, share prices of some of the chip manufacturers, semiconductor businesses, and even the energy businesses. So this is why everything now that evolves around AI has a huge impact on global economy. And then you have the European answer, and here comes the individual first, the values, protection of the citizens, protection, even they never asked me, but my protection seems to be in the focus of all the European regulations. Whether it is a competitive advantage or disadvantage, that's one of my favorite topics. I think to a large extent, it can be with a pessimistic head on, you can see it easier as a disadvantage because it can be seen as restrictive, it can be seen as over-regulating. But with a more optimistic hat on, it provides certainty. And certainly the GDPR example showed that there was a lot of rationale behind what the European Union has done. And now this seems to be widespreading as an overall regulatory example that will prevail also globally. Back to AI and regulation, though, the jury is still out because the technology is still out, and the technology is still very much in an evolutionary phase. So it might be that Europe's regulation comes a bit early in the game and might actually cause some disadvantage. The Draghi report, which is very interesting read, puts a very dark future for Europe and puts an absolute warning sign on what is going on. I'm more optimistic than the Draghi report because I do think that there is some merits. For example, when you talk about AI regulation, the risk-based approach I really like in the regulation. The prohibitions which entered into force on 2nd of February, I really like in the regulation. So there is a lot of things to like there. Proof of the pudding will be whether it becomes more of a global phenomenon, similarly to GDPR. If it remains isolated and applicable only in Europe, it can backfire.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, but I also think that for the first time, instead to run after the events, European community has been proactive. Okay, so at least we have to congratulate for this. And yes. Also because, in any case, laws are done, they can be also rethought and reshaped based on the requirement of a certain point of time. So how then do you want then do you have any other aspect of this very fascinating issue that you would like to share with us?
Maybe what we can discuss is the importance of infrastructure and fair and transparent access. And one of the examples is really the European data spaces, which are started to mention, which is a new initiative, a sector-based initiative, which makes it very interesting in my view. So there are currently 14 data spaces to be enacted, for example, not only in health, but in agri, in manufacturing, energy, mobility, financial sector, public administration, even media and cultural heritage. And I think this can be a very interesting example on supported sharing, not mandated, but supported sharing going forward, and hopefully can help in balancing out some of the Draghi report's dark sides for the future of Europe.
Thank you. So I think that we could also go for hours to discuss all the different details of these very broad issues, because today we only have pick up the more important fact. But could you give us a recap and the key takeaways on what we have discussed so far, so to leave to our audience a point to think about and them to study further by themselves?
Thank you. So I think data sovereignty is a critical issue in today's very global and very digital world. It's also a key issue for digital and global humanism. It should ensure, though, that data is subject to local laws and governance, protecting national security, which is very important, but also the individual's privacy rights. As we continue to rely on technologies, we should feel safe where our data lands, and we should also feel safe about our country's national security measures. On the other hand, as technology is very, very global, we need to make sure that these technologies can interact also in the future, because that is the way how we will be able to innovate and continue having breakthroughs like the pandemic response was, and hopefully the superintelligence that some people are foreseeing for the end of this year, some people expect to happen in 3 or 4 years' time. I would encourage all of you to stay informed about what is going on in this very exciting and very fast evolving regulatory scene. Please look at your local regulations, but also try to keep up with the rest. And I do believe sharing is caring. The more we safely share, actually, the better future we will be able to build, not only for ourselves, but for our children and for the next generations as well.
So, Dora, thank you very much, because today you have cared for us in sharing your thought on this very interesting subject. I would like to thank you very much, everybody that is listening and watching us. And I wish you a very pleasant continuation of the day. Thank you very much. And Dora, thank you
Thank you, Carla, for the fascinating discussion. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
I want to thank our guest for joining today's episode of GTWN Now, and give a big thank you to our sponsors, CMS Global, for making this episode possible. Today's podcast will be available on our website, gtwn.org, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you'll be notified when new episodes drop. I'm your host, Rasali Gitau, GTWN International Board Member, wishing you a week of wonder.